The charity gala had run late,
What
as
is
these
it?
things always
We need to
did.
go.
Robert
Hurry.
Harrison
Okay,
checked his
let's go.
watch
This way.
as he walked down the sidewalk with his daughter Emma's small hand tucked firmly in his own. Nearly 10 o'clock, far past her bedtime, but she'd insisted on coming with him tonight. At 4 years old, she was already developing opinions about where she wanted to be, and tonight she'd wanted to be with her daddy. Robert was 46, his blonde hair showing distinguished touches of gray at the temples. The tuxedo he wore had cost more than most people made in a month, though he wore it with the easy comfort of someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to worry about money. Harrison Technologies had made him a billionaire 3 times over, and tonight's gala had raised nearly $2 million for homeless services in the city. The irony of what happened next would stay with him for the rest of his life. "Daddy, I'm sleepy," Emma said, her voice small and tired. "I know, sweetheart. The car is just around the corner. You can sleep on the way home." They turned onto a quieter street, the sounds of the gala fading behind them. The neighborhood was in transition, gentrifying rapidly. But there were still pockets of poverty visible in the doorways and alleys. Robert walked quickly, wanting to get Emma to the car and home to bed. That's when he heard it. A soft cough, followed by movement in a doorway they were passing. A woman sat huddled there, wrapped in a tattered green jacket that had seen better days years ago. Her dark hair hung in tangled strands around her face. Her clothes were dirty and torn. She held a cup in front of her, empty except for a few coins. Robert had seen hundreds of homeless people in his life. He donated to shelters, funded programs, wrote checks that helped thousands. But he'd learned long ago not to look too closely, not to make eye contact, not to let individual stories pierce the comfortable distance his wealth provided. He would have walked past. He was already walking past. But Emma stopped. She stopped so suddenly that Robert's arm jerked, pulling him to a halt. He turned to look at his daughter, ready to gently urge her forward, and saw that she was staring at the woman in the doorway, with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Emma, come on. We need to—" "Dad," Emma said, her voice strange, uncertain. "That homeless woman looks like Mom." The words hit Robert like a physical blow. He turned slowly, really looking at the woman for the first time, and the world tilted sickeningly beneath his feet. It couldn't be. It wasn't possible. But even beneath the dirt and the tangled hair and the hollowed cheeks, even after 7 years, he knew that face. "Claire!" The name came out as barely a whisper. The woman looked up at him, and he saw recognition flare in her eyes, followed immediately by shame so profound it made him ache. "Robert!" Her voice was hoarse, broken. "Please, please, just go." But Robert couldn't move, couldn't process what he was seeing. Claire Matheson, the woman he'd loved more than life itself. The woman who'd disappeared 7 years ago without a trace. The woman he'd searched for desperately for 2 years before finally, agonizingly, accepting that she was gone. Here, on a street corner, homeless. Emma tugged on his hand, confusion and something like hope in her small face. She'd been too young when Claire left to really remember her. But Robert had kept pictures, had told her stories about the woman who'd given birth to her. "Is it really her?" Emma asked. "Is it really my mommy?" Claire made a sound like a wounded animal. No, I'm not." "You need to go, please. She shouldn't see me like this." But Emma had already pulled free from Robert's hand. She walked straight to Claire, her fancy dress incongruous against the grimy doorway, and peered up at her with those serious eyes that sometimes seemed too old for her small face. "You have my nose," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Daddy says I got my nose from you." Claire's face crumpled. Tears streamed down her dirty cheeks. Oh God, I'm so sorry." Robert found himself moving forward, kneeling down beside them both, his expensive tuxedo pressing against the dirty pavement. Up close, he could see how thin Claire was, how her hands shook, how her skin had the grayish tint of long-term malnutrition. "What happened?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Claire, what happened to you?" She shook her head, unable to speak. "Daddy, she's crying," Emma said, concerned. "We should help her." Robert looked at his daughter, at her small face full of innocent compassion, and something in him broke open. "Yes," he said. "Yes, we should help her." He stood up, pulling out his phone, calling his driver. "James, change of plans. Pick us up at the corner of 5th and Morrison. We're going to the hospital." No, Claire said desperately. No hospitals. Please, I can't. I don't have insurance. I can't afford. I'll pay for everything, Robert said firmly. Claire, you're coming with us. Right now. I can't. I'm too. Look at me. I'm filthy. I don't care. Robert's voice was gentle but implacable. 7 years ago, you vanished from my life. Whatever happened, whatever choices were made, they don't matter right now. What matters is that you're here, you're alive. And you need help. Please, let me help you. The Blacktown car pulled up moments later. James got out, his face carefully neutral as he took in the scene, and opened the door without comment. Robert helped Claire to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. She weighed almost nothing, he realized with a stab of horror. Emma climbed in first, patting the seat beside her. You can sit next to me, she said to Claire. I don't mind that you're dirty. Daddy says kindness is more important than being clean. Claire let out a sob and carefully sat down, keeping as much distance as she could from Emma's fancy dress. Robert slid in on her other side, and they drove toward the hospital in silence, broken only by Claire's quiet crying. At the emergency room, Robert's name and willingness to pay cash worked their usual magic. Claire was taken back immediately, given fluids and antibiotics and a full examination. Robert waited with Emma, who'd fallen asleep in a chair despite the bright lights and hospital sounds. It was nearly 3 a.m. when the doctor finally came out to talk to him. Dr. Patricia Lee was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a direct manner. Mr. Harrison, the patient is stable. She's severely malnourished, dehydrated, and has pneumonia. She also has some old injuries that healed poorly and what appears to be long-term trauma. She's going to need significant care and support. Whatever she needs, Robert said. Money is not an issue. I appreciate that, but what she needs isn't just medical care. She needs psychiatric support, addiction counseling, housing, job training. She needs a comprehensive approach to getting her life back. She had a life, Robert said quietly. 7 years ago, she had everything. And then one day, she was just gone. Dr. Lee looked at him carefully. Did she leave or was she taken? I don't know. I never knew. The police investigated but found nothing. No body, no evidence of foul play. Eventually, they concluded she'd left voluntarily. Has she told you what happened? Not yet. She's barely spoken. Give her time. Whatever she went through, it was clearly devastating. People don't end up on the streets by accident. There's always a story, and it's usually traumatic. Robert was allowed to see Claire an hour later. She was in a hospital bed, cleaned up and dressed in a gown, connected to an IV. She looked both better and worse. Better because the dirt was gone. Worse because now he could see just how much weight she'd lost, how aged she looked. Emma was still asleep in the waiting room, watched over by James. Robert sat in the chair beside Claire's bed and waited for her to acknowledge him. Finally, she spoke. I left because I didn't want to hurt you. The words made no sense. You didn't want to hurt me, so you disappeared? I was sick, Robert, in my head. I'd been fighting it for years, but after Emma was born, it got so much worse. Postpartum depression that never went away. Anxiety that made me afraid to leave the house. And then the voices started. Robert went very still. Voices? Telling me I was a bad mother. That I was going to hurt Emma. That everyone would be better off without me. Her voice was flat, matter-of-fact. I tried to fight it. I tried medication, therapy, but I was so scared all the time. Scared I'd hurt her. Scared I'd hurt you. Scared of my own mind. So you left. I left. I thought if I was gone, you'd both be safe. You'd be sad for a while, but then you'd move on. Emma would never remember me. You'd find someone else. Someone stable and sane who could be the mother she deserved. Claire? Don't. She held up a hand. Don't tell me I was wrong to think that way. I know I was. I know it now. But when you're in the middle of that kind of mental illness, you can't see clearly. Everything is distorted. The things that seem logical in that state are completely irrational, but you can't tell the difference. What happened after you left? Claire was quiet for a long moment. I spent the first year in a series of cheap hotels, living off what was left in our joint account. I was planning to end it, but I couldn't quite work up the courage. Then the money ran out. I tried to get a job, but I couldn't hold it together long enough. I'd have panic attacks most days. Eventually, I got fired. She paused, her breathing labored. After that, it was a fast slide. Shelters when I could get in, streets when I couldn't. I got robbed a few times, assaulted once, started avoiding people, avoiding eye contact, just trying to survive each day. The mental illness got worse without treatment. Sometimes I couldn't tell what was real and what wasn't. Why didn't you come back? Why didn't you reach out? Because I was ashamed. Because I'd thrown away everything good in my life. Because I didn't deserve to come back. And because part of me still believed the voices telling me you were better off without me. Robert felt tears on his face. We weren't better off, Claire. Emma grew up without a mother. I've spent 7 years wondering if you were alive or dead. Nothing about our lives has been better. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. They sat in silence for a while. Then Robert asked the question he needed answered. What do you want to do now? I don't know. I don't have the right to want anything. That's not true. You're still a person. You still get to want things. Claire looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time since he'd found her. I want to be well. I want to get treatment, real treatment, and figure out how to be a functioning human being again. But Robert, I'm not asking you to take me back. I'm not asking to be part of your lives. I know I destroyed that possibility. What if I want you to be part of our lives? Then I'd say you're being kind but irrational. Look at me. I'm a homeless woman with severe mental illness. I abandoned my family. I'm not someone you build a life with. You're Emma's mother, Robert said quietly. You're the woman I loved enough to build a life with once before. And you're sick. Mental illness isn't a moral failing, Claire. It's an illness. It needs treatment, just like any other illness. It's not that simple. No, it's not. It's going to be complicated and difficult and probably painful. But Emma found you tonight for a reason. After all these years, all those miles of streets in this city, somehow we walked past the exact doorway where you were sitting. That has to mean something. Claire's tears started again. What if I can't get better? What if I'm too broken? Then we'll deal with that when we come to it. But you don't get to decide you're not worth helping before we even try. Over the following days, Robert arranged everything. A private psychiatric facility where Claire could get comprehensive treatment. The best doctors, therapists, support staff. He visited every day, sometimes bringing Emma, sometimes coming alone. The staff cautioned him to be patient, to understand that recovery from this kind of trauma and illness would take time. Months at minimum, possibly years. There would be setbacks and breakthroughs and long stretches, where nothing seemed to change. Robert heard them, but he'd already made his decision. Claire had walked away 7 years ago to protect them from her illness. Now it was his turn to step forward and help her fight it. Emma's role in all this surprised him. She was too young to understand the full complexity of what had happened, but she understood the basics. Her mommy had been sick and lost, and now they'd found her and were helping her get better. When mommy is all better, can she come home? Emma asked one evening as Robert tucked her into bed. I don't know, sweetheart. That's a long way off, and a lot of things need to happen first. But you want her to, right? Come home. Robert thought about his answer carefully. I want your mom to get well. I want her to be healthy and stable and able to have a good life. If that life includes being part of our family again, that would be wonderful. But the most important thing is that she gets better, even if that means she needs to build a different kind of life. That's very complicated, Daddy. I know. Love usually is. Months passed. Claire slowly, incrementally improved. The medications were adjusted and readjusted. She worked with therapists on her trauma, her depression, her anxiety. She learned coping strategies for the voices that sometimes still whispered at the edges of her consciousness. And gradually, carefully, she built a relationship with Emma. Short, supervised visits at first. Just an hour or two, reading books together. Coloring. Simple conversations about simple things. Robert watched them together and saw glimpses of the woman Claire had been before the illness took hold. Her gentleness with Emma, the way she listened with full attention, the careful love in her eyes when she looked at their daughter. But he also saw the work it took for her to maintain that stability, the effort required to push back against the destructive thoughts, to stay present, to believe she deserved to be there. One afternoon, about 8 months after he'd found her on that street corner, Claire asked to speak with him privately. They sat in a small garden on the facility grounds, autumn leaves drifting down around them. I want to thank you, she said, for everything you've done, for not giving up on me when you had every right to. You don't need to thank me for that. I do, though, because most people in your position would have walked away, would have said I'd made my choices and had to live with the consequences. You didn't do that. You saw someone who needed help and you helped them, even though I'd hurt you terribly. You're Emma's mother. You're... Robert paused, searching for the right words. You're someone I loved. That doesn't just disappear because you got sick. Do you still love me? The question hung in the air between them. Robert thought about his answer, wanting to be honest but not wanting to make promises he couldn't keep. I don't know, he said finally. I love the woman you were. I love the mother you're learning to be for Emma. But I don't know if we can find our way back to what we had before. Too much has changed. Too much hurt has been caused, even if it wasn't intentional. Claire nodded, her face composed. That's fair. More than fair. I wasn't asking because I expect us to just pick up where we left off. I was asking because I need to know how to navigate this. What boundaries to respect. What to hope for and what to let go of. I think, Robert said carefully, that we should focus on you continuing to get well and on you building a relationship with Emma. Everything else can wait until we have more stable ground to stand on. Okay, I can do that. More months passed. Claire was eventually discharged from the facility to a supported living arrangement, an apartment in a complex where she had access to services but also independence. She got a part-time job at a bookstore, something low-stress that she could manage. She attended therapy twice a week and a support group for people with severe mental illness. And she spent time with Emma, regular scheduled visits that gradually became more frequent and longer, supervised at first, then on her own as she proved her stability. Robert watched it all with a mixture of hope and caution. He wanted Claire to succeed, wanted Emma to have her mother back. But he also knew how fragile recovery could be, how easily someone could slip back into old patterns. One evening, nearly 18 months after finding Claire, Emma asked the question again. Can Mommy come home now? Why do you ask? Because she's all better. She takes me to the park and reads me stories and she doesn't cry anymore. She's just like other mommies. Robert pulled Emma onto his lap. She's doing much better, that's true. But sweetheart, sometimes when grown-ups have been apart for a long time, they need to figure out if they still fit together. Mommy and I are still working on that. Don't you love her? The question was so direct, so simple, so completely cutting to the heart of everything Robert had been avoiding thinking about. Did he love Claire? He loved the memory of her. He loved the woman she'd been before the illness. He loved the effort she was making now to be well, to be present for Emma. But did he love her, the real her? The person she was now with all her scars and struggles and hard-won stability? Yes, he heard himself say. Yes, I think I do. Emma beamed. Then she can come home. It's not quite that simple, sweetheart. But maybe, Robert thought, maybe it was. Maybe love didn't have to be complicated. Maybe it could be as simple as choosing every day to show up for someone, to support their healing, to believe in their capacity to change. He'd been doing that for 18 months without quite admitting it was love. That weekend, he asked Claire to have dinner with him. Not at the facility, not with Emma, just the two of them at a quiet restaurant. She arrived nervous, wearing a simple dress, her dark hair clean and styled, her face fuller and healthier than it had been. She looked like herself again, but different. Older, yes, but also stronger somehow, tempered by everything she'd been through. They ordered food and made small talk. Then Robert took a breath and said what he needed to say. Emma asked me if you could come home. Claire's face went carefully neutral. What did you tell her? I told her it was complicated. But I've been thinking about it and maybe it doesn't have to be. Robert, let me finish. These past 18 months, watching you fight for your health, watching you build a relationship with Emma, watching you refuse to give up even when things were hard, it's reminded me of why I fell in love with you in the first place. Your strength, your determination, your capacity to love even when it's difficult. Claire's eyes filled with tears. I'm not the same person I was. No, you're not. Neither am I. We've both been changed by what happened, but maybe that's okay. Maybe we can build something new, something that accounts for who we are now instead of trying to recreate what we had before. What are you saying? I'm saying I'd like you to come home. Not right away, we can